Jimmy Piersall is quite possibly the first ever sports athlete to get blackballed by the American media. This is because Piersall led a career full of outrageous antics, fights, and mental breakdowns never witnessed in American sports before. However, despite Piersall displaying uncharacteristic actions like running the bases backwards after hitting a home run, Hollywood thought Piersall's unique life story and baseball career would be a perfect script for a major motion picture. Now, before we get into the video, I'm gonna need you to leave a like on this video and smash the subscribe button. That is the best way to show your support here on the channel. And finally, if you want to get active, ring that bell and comment down below your thoughts on this Jimmy Piersall story. Jimmy Piersall was born on November 14th, 1929 in Waterbury, Connecticut. His father, John Piersall, was a house painter who struggled to stay employed during the difficult 1930s. His mother, Mary, battled severe depression for most of Jimmy's childhood, often residing at a local state hospital. According to Piersall himself, quote, "If my father was preparing supper when I got home, it wouldn't be necessary for us to exchange a word. I knew that meant my mother had gone away again." Now, due to the fact his mother was often admitted into mental institutions, Jimmy's father, John, took an active interest in his son's athletic endeavors, so much so that his father would forbid young Jimmy from attending social events, participating in other sports, and even taking up a part-time job in fear that these other activities would interfere with Jim's baseball practice, whether it was with his team or workouts with his father. However, these father and son workout routines would eventually prove to hinder Jim more than help improve his baseball ability, and many believe that the intensity displayed by John could have helped ignite Jim's eventual mental breakdown. Although at the time, John's intensity did not lead Jim to shy away from the game of baseball. Instead, his father's persistent motivation towards Jim playing ball only helped Piersall in furthering his baseball career after graduating high school in 1947. Because after graduation, Jimmy was left with a tough decision on whether or not to accept multiple athletic scholarships from colleges like Duke University or sign professionally with teams like the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox, whom he both attended workouts with earlier that spring. Eventually, Jim would agree to a deal with the Boston Red Sox and their scouting director, Neil Mahoney, in 1948. Now, interestingly enough, Piersall had this to say later in life on why he chose to sign with the Red Sox over the Yankees. Piersall said, "Waterbury is a Yankee city, but I was a Red Sox boy. I would not have given my Yankee friends at home the satisfaction of signing with their team." Piersall would begin his professional career as a center fielder in 1948, playing for Low A Scranton of the Eastern League. Now, his first season in pro ball proved to be a positive one, as Piersall excelled during his time in Scranton after he hit .281 with 12 home runs and led the league with 92 RBIs in 141 games. Now, this freshman campaign earned the 19-year-old a promotion all the way to Louisville next season in 1949, the Red Sox top affiliate. Now, Piersall would only last 2 full seasons in AAA Louisville, as in his first season in 1949, he hit .271, drove in 58 runs, and cracked only 3 home runs. Then, in 1950, he did much of the same, as he batted .255, collected 60 steaks, and once again popped only 3 long balls. Despite Jimmy Piersall getting a cup of coffee with the Red Sox in 1950, as he made his MLB debut on September 7th, playing in only 6 total games that year and managing to collect his first MLB hit on September 27th off Senators lefty Glenn Bearden, Piersall's first full shot in the majors didn't come until 2 years later in 1952 at the age of 22. Now, Jim would return to Boston at the start of that season, but not as a center fielder. Instead, the Red Sox asked Jim to play shortstop. This unexpected position change put Piersall in a tizzy, and it wasn't long until Piersall was sent back down to the minors. But it wasn't necessarily because of his play at the new position. Instead, it was due to an outburst that occurred in the Red Sox clubhouse before an affair with the New York Yankees. As the story goes, Jim first engaged in a fistfight with Yankee infielder Billy Martin in the Red Sox dugout. Then, following that brawl, Piersall briefly scuffled with teammate Mickey McDermott in the Red Sox clubhouse. And even after several outrageous instances such as those, Piersall went as far as to spank the 4-year-old son of teammate Vern Steffens in the Red Sox clubhouse during a game. Eventually, instances like these led to Jim's demotion back to the minor leagues. But it seemed that emotion did not stop Jim from displaying outrageous antics on the field, as in one game, Jim was called out on a questionable strike 3 call. Following the call, Piersall looked at the umpire, never said a word, reached into his back pocket, and pulled out a water pistol and shot it at the umpire. Well, this scared the umpire so much that he fainted and had to be revived out behind home plate. It was also said that during Game 1 of a doubleheader, Jim ran up into the stands in the middle of the game wearing nothing but his jockstrap. This outrageous act led Jim not being allowed to play the second game, and eventually being admitted to the Westboro State Hospital. Now, while at Westboro, Piersall underwent various types of treatments, and one of those treatments was known as electroshock therapy, in addition to being given lithium to treat his bipolar disorder. Now, Jim would spend 6 weeks in the hospital receiving treatment for his mental illness, which would force him to miss the remainder of the 1952 season. Now, interestingly enough, Jim's popularity among the public increased after he returned to the Red Sox in 1953. Now, many believe the reasoning for this stems due to the fact Jim persevered through the tough times and was able to continue his baseball career after his admission into the hospital. Now, this personal triumph made Jim's story very relatable to the American public and in turn made him a household name. However, Piersall's release from the hospital did not mean he was totally immune to displaying unorthodox gestures on the diamond, as in one instance, while playing center field at Yankee Stadium during a blowout game, Piersall got so bored that he walked behind the monuments in center field and started having a conversation with Babe Ruth's statue. Then, on another occasion, while playing at Fenway Park, Jim got so mad after a questionable strike 3 call by the umpire, he immediately sprinted to center field and sat behind the flagpole in disgust. Now, these never-before-seen outbursts by a professional athlete, in addition to Piersall's personal memoir entitled Fear Strikes Out, published in 1955, caught the attention of Hollywood and director Robert Mulligan. Apparently, Mulligan was so captivated by Jim's story that it inspired him to create a biographical film based upon Jim's mental and emotional struggles that accompanied him during his quest of making it to the major leagues. The film was released in 1957 and went by the same name as Piersall's original memoir, Fear Strikes Out. Now, although the film went on to become a success, as it currently has an 83% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 76% approval rating according to audiences, not to mention it helped Piersall's national notoriety at the time, Piersall himself had some harsh words to say about how the film depicted himself and his father. In one instance, Jim said that the film distorted the facts and, quote, overblamed his father for his problems. In addition, he said that, quote, the movie was ridiculous and that it, quote, made him look weird. After spending 8 seasons in Boston, from 1950 to 1958, and hitting .273, slugging .397, driving in 366 runs, and cranking 66 home runs, Jim would get dealt to the Cleveland Indians in 1958, where his antics continued while with the Tribe. Now the Indian faithful would get their first glimpse of Jim's quirkiness after Piersall peppered the Chicago White Sox scoreboard as their annual fireworks went off after a White Sox player hit a home run. Not to mention, the 18-year MLB veteran Jim Fregosi remembers Piersall screaming at him after he attempted to put on a pickoff play while Jim was on the bases. Oh, and by the way, Jim would regularly attempt to time opposing pitchers while in the on-deck circle. This did not sit well with some pitchers, like the Yankees' Jim Coates, who intentionally threw at Piersall while still standing in the on-deck circle. It's important to note that these antics were not just to entertain the fans. In fact, some of the things Jim did were meant to motivate himself, like cursing out the other team while he was taking batting practice before games. In fact, there was one incident in New York where 2 men came rushing onto the field attempting to attack Jimmy. Well, luckily for Piersall, he saw the 2 men rushing at him, and he was able to defend himself by knocking out the first guy and kicking the second guy down on his ass. Now, despite Piersall winning his second Gold Glove and finishing the 1961 season with a .322 mark, which was good enough for 3rd overall in the American League, the Indians would trade Jimmy to the Washington Senators, where he would only spend 1.5 seasons before getting shipped to the Mets in 1963 in exchange for Gil Hodges. Now, interestingly enough, Piersall was the first ever player to get traded in exchange for a manager. This is because Gil Hodges would be named the Senators' 3rd ever manager following this trade. Now, the minute Jim joined the Mets, there was obvious tension between him and his new manager, Casey Stengel. As many of you know, Casey Stengel was a colorful character in his own right, and by adding Piersall to the mix of the Mets, this stole Casey's thunder. Now, for example, the craziest antic Piersall displayed in his career occurred while donning the blue and orange. This is because on June 23rd, 1963, Jim's home run total sat at 99 lifetime, coming into a contest against the Phillies. Now, according to teammate Duke Snider, Piersall said that he would get more coverage for hitting his 100th home run than Snider got when he hit his 400th blast. And he did. Jim was able to crank home run number 100 off Dallas Green at the Polo Grounds and gave the fans a real show as he proceeded to run the bases backwards. But unfortunately for Jim, this never-before-seen home run trot did not sit well with Phillies pitcher Dallas Green, Mets manager Casey Stengel, and baseball's commissioner Ford Frick. And many believe this stunt was the reason why Piersall got released 3 days later. Piersall's final team would be the Los Angeles Angels. Now, although Piersall's play slowly dwindled under the stars of Southern California between the years of 1964 and 1967, Piersall himself called these years his best in baseball because of his relationship with Angels general manager Fred Haney, who Piersall said never lied to him. Not to mention, Hollywood once again beckoned for baseball's bozo. Now, this time, Piersall's likeness would go from the silver screen to the small screen, as he would appear in many TV shows opposite of Hollywood stars, like Lucille Ball, Milton Berle, and Don Rickles. He also hosted his own radio show on the station KABC 6 nights a week during the off-season. And finally, Jim would end his professional baseball career at the very beginning of the 1967 season after playing in just 5 games and going hitless in 3 official at-bats with LA. And Piersall would end his 17-year career with a lifetime batting average of .272, an OPS of .718, a slugging percentage of .386, 811 runs, 591 RBIs, and 104 home runs. And after Piersall's playing career had ended, Jim decided to begin an odyssey in the peripheries of America's pastime. Now, Jim first began his new journey by being a gopher for baseball's most outlandish owner, Charles O'Finley of the Oakland A's. However, Piersall's time in Oakland did not last long, as he was let go after just 2 seasons following an outburst with O'Finley. When San Francisco Chronicle writer Bruce Jenkins asked Piersall about his layoff at the hands of O'Finley, Piersall said, quote, "I'll tell you about Charlie O'Finley. If he was walking down the street and his eyeball fell out of his socket and it was rolling down the hill, I'd kick it." Now, after Jim's stint in Oakland, Piersall would get a crack as a major league coach on Billy Martin's Texas Rangers during 1975 and 1976. However, Piersall's nationwide status reignited once he got hired by the Chicago White Sox to be Harry Carey's right-hand man in the broadcast booth. The combination of Harry and Jim on air seemed to play very well among the fans, as the two had a yin and yang type of relationship, which was filled of one-liners, low blows, and cheap shots among each other. However, Piersall would sometimes redirect those cheap shots at the struggling White Sox players. There are many prime examples of when Jimmy had gone too far. One of the times was when the Yankees came to town and their Latin third baseman made an error on a pop-up, which then Jim proceeded to make the comment that, quote, "Those Latin players can't catch pop-ups anyways." Or when he criticized Sox outfielder Ralph Garr for making too many errors by saying, quote, "Every ball that goes to left field is an adventure." And let's not forget the time that Piersall made a few wisecracks at the wife of Sox owner Bill Veeck, as he called her, quote, "a colossal bore," and said that she, quote, "ought to stay in the kitchen." As a matter of fact, Piersall's comments cut so deep with newly hired White Sox coaching staff of Tony La Russa and Jim Leland that the two actually went down to the TV station to accost Jim. But finally, the straw that broke the camel's back came in 1983 when Jimmy called the wives of modern-day baseball players, quote, "horny broads." Jim was fired shortly thereafter. Despite Jim's mouth costing him a job with the White Sox, he remained closely connected to the game by being an on-air baseball analyst and contributor for WSCR Radio in Chicago from 1992 until 2006. And although Piersall's colorful career in baseball did not earn him a plaque in Cooperstown, New York, it did earn him a spot in the Boston Red Sox Hall of Fame in 2010. And finally, Jimmy Piersall would take his last breath in Illinois on June 3rd, 2017, at the age of 87, which was 60 years after the premiere of his iconic biopic, Fear Strikes Out. Now, it's safe to say that Jim Piersall was truly a one-of-a-kind ball player whose mental struggles may have defined him, but his fear of striking out never got in his way of succeeding in life. Then again, I don't think it'd be wrong to say that Jimmy Piersall was in fact baseball's psychopath.